Hello, welcome to Whole Life Health and the Healing Lounge with Lisbeth, and this is my friend Jill. Say hello, Jill.
Hello.
So I think it's so helpful to talk to as many people as possible about professional stuff because everybody has a different path. Everybody has a different journey. So today we're just going to spend a little time talking with Jill. So I'm just going to ask you some questions, and I'd just like to say that Jill and I met at the American Holistic Nurses Association conference in Branson, Missouri in May, and she happens to live in Duluth, which is awesome because now we can get together like this. And so give me 5. Thanks for coming, Sandy. Awesome. So Jill, what I love about Jill is that I believe nursing was your second, third, maybe fourth career. So tell our listeners, like, why did you decide to go to nursing school?
Because I always wanted to be a nurse.
You did?
Oh, I always wanted to be a nurse. I came out of high school and was a nurse's aide at a local hospital and worked on weekends. And one of my inspirations of nursing was a nurse, actually a great aunt of mine, and she was a nurse, and she was unbelievable person. But basically, I wanted to wear the nurse's hat.
Really?
Oh yeah, back in the 70s. Yes, they still wore the hat and the uniform.
The dress.
Yeah, the dress, the white dress. And I met some really great nurses when I was being a nurse's aide, and they really encouraged me to do that. Fast forward, I got into the nursing program, but my parents thought I should do something else. So I ended up in Minneapolis for a while, through 76, 70 into 77, and just took went to Lakeland Medical and Dental Academy and took my training there and became a nursing, actually a lab tech and office manager. And
Wow.
I worked downtown Minneapolis for about a year. Loving it, loving it, loving it. But then, I got married.
Oh, snap.
And let's see, fast forward 30 plus years, raised 4 children and sent them off to college, and finally just said, okay, it's time for me to go back to school. And so after 30 years, I went back and got my nursing degree because I always wanted to be a nurse.
So what year was that?
What year I went back to school?
Yeah.
2002.
That
Took
is
my
awesome.
first anatomy and biology class. I thought I was going to die.
Because
I hadn't opened a book for 30 years. I mean, for a school book, as you would say. You know, I love reading, I love doing those things, but yeah.
Wow.
But I started college classes.
And how long did it take you once you started?
I went and did my nurse LPN program and then went and got my RN, so about 5 years.
Okay.
And worked full-time in between.
Wow. That is incredible. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So, having said that, if there was one thing that you had known while you were in nursing school, that you did know that you know now, that would have benefited you in some way or made it easier, what would that be?
To when you're young, you know, have your direction, have your focus. That's the main thing. And don't put things aside if that's what your career wants to be as a nurse, a teacher, a biology, an engineer, any of those perspectives. The biggest key is if you have those desires to learn and you want to learn about and be an educator or in healthcare, just do it, because there's always some other doors that'll open up after that. So,
Do you think it's harder later?
yeah.
What makes it harder?
The program that I went to was actually a program through the college because they wanted nurses to stay in the rural area, and they didn't have enough nurses. So we were back actually a what would you say, a pilot program, a satellite program.
Oh, sure.
And so we learned all of our things on the computer, and then we just did off the computer into classrooms for our clinicals when that needed to be done. But otherwise, we learned pretty much on the computer. Not a good way to learn. You still need that. You still need all those perspectives. The computer as well as the teacher in front of you, as well as the clinicals and things like that. So I think that was the hardest piece.
Wow.
Learning on the computer.
I think nurses are hands-on learners for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That would be really difficult.
Very difficult.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the reason that we were able to, or I was able to go through the program was because there was other women that were like me that were going to school after 30 some years out of school, and we made our own group of camaraderie of nurses, of women, and so we're still, some of them were still raising their children, and so we were able to have our own study group and
that's
learn
really
those
nice.
things. Yeah,
kind of being with people who have the same life circumstance.
and had the passion for it too. So
I can remember when I was in nursing school, I was single and had no children, and I was always astounded at these folks who were in school that had families and children. I was like, when do you study?
right.
Oh my gosh. So I don't think I ever would have made it had I had children when I was there. So hats off to you, my friend.
Thank you.
What do you think the best thing for you is about being a nurse?
Just because you have the door's open to you for different variety of things that you want to do. If you don't like pediatrics or ICU, you can look for something else. If you want to go into oncology or emergency nursing, flight nursing, traveling nursing, it's just the versatile. That's the biggest thing about nursing. You don't have to settle just because you end up going into that profession.
I agree. That is an awesome, if you get bored, which is kind of common, or burned out, or, so having that flexibility, especially as your family dynamics change, that's one of the things that I love about being a nurse, is you can kind of write your own ticket.
Yes.
And you can't do that in most other professions.
No.
So yay!
Yay again!
So, kind of in that same vein of professional stuff, if you could change one thing about our profession, what would that be?
What would I change as one thing? I thought about that question. I think that in order to be a good and experienced nursing, that you should be able to do more nursing, as some kind of nursing hands-on, to get into the program. I know now that you have to be like a certified nursing assistant in order. Many of the colleges have it that way, that you have to get certified nursing assistant, at least say that you're going to be working. And I think that's the hugest, hands-on, knowing what your passion is, and to be a compassionate nurse. I think people just go in it because they know it's good money. And they know that they can make quick money and get out of college education and come out of school for 4 years and say, well, I can be making $50-$60 an hour, and where can you do that after college education? So I think just really knowing what you're getting into, I think, and understanding what your role is as a nurse, because that's what you started out as, is being educated as a nurse, and deciding how you want to use your education as well as your career, helping people and being compassionate and having the right integrity.
Integrity.
Yes.
That's a big one. Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned having sort of that hands-on skill stuff before you even get into the program. I can remember even having had a background, everybody in my family's in medicine, and having been exposed to it, and I was in sports medicine, thinking, oh, nursing school will be so easy. I know all the anatomy, the physiology, the lingo. It was the hardest thing I ever have done. So it's certainly not for wussies.
No.
That is for sure.
Right. And I think the key thing too about being a nurse is that critical thinking. If you don't have that on a basis, even going through high school and into college, that critical thinking kind of out of the box, thinking what if, assessment, learning to assess and understanding that value.
Do you think that that's something that you can learn, or you either have it or you don't?
I think you can learn it.
Okay.
I think it's something you can learn, and I find out too, talking to other nurses, that they have courses on critical thinking.
That's really smart.
Really smart.
I think that communication is definitely something that should be in all curriculums, but especially in nursing school, because you think about all the people with whom you are communicating about your patient, you're their advocate, and if you don't have those communication skills, it makes life so much harder. And when you're dealing with those people that are not very nice sometimes, whether it's a doctor or an ornery patient or family members, that's a skill set that not a lot of us have, I think. So I think communication is also a really important thing to be part of the curriculum. So, you know, I haven't known you for that long, but for the little time that I have known you, you seem so just grounded and sort of relaxed and just comfortable in your own skin. So, like, what do you do and how do you deal with all the craziness that comes with, you know, caring for people?
I think the whole key, what you said, is to be grounded, to understand who you are, and you don't change for anybody else out there, but to know what's important to you, work ethics, you know, your faith, your spirituality, what's important to you on a health basis or day-to-day basis, basically. What makes you the best person that you can be. And that way, if you understand who you are, it's much easier to be grounded and be, you know, understand about how you feel and how you express yourself.
I think I wrote a blog post about this, about how, as a nurse, one of the most important things that can help sort of protect you, but also sort of honor who you are as a person, is to know, like, what is non-negotiable. Because when you start caring for people, you are put in circumstances, you see parts of yourself that maybe you didn't even know existed. You get tested in ways that you've never been tested before. So I think to be a really successful nurse and a grounded nurse is to know, like, what is it that I value, what is it that I will not sort of tolerate, whether it's being bullied by, you know, somebody else or a patient. So having really strong boundaries is huge for this profession, I think, for sure, because there are so many circumstances and situations where that can be tested. And if you don't have strong boundaries, you're going to get steamrolled like a hot pancake or something. So I think that's a really great point that you make about sort of knowing who you are and staying true to that. Even though it's not easy.
Not easy.
It is not easy.
And know where you came from. Know the values. Everybody has grown up with values and knows what a priority and right and wrong. I mean, and then when you come into a situation, I think the whole thing is you're not there to solve everybody's situation. You need to break it down into little pieces. You know, if there's an episode with a client or a family, what can you solve in that? You don't have to solve the whole world at that point, or in an 8-hour shift, let alone. So it's really understanding that if you can just take small pieces and know that you can handle those, and that helps you get through the day. It helps you solve and be a problem solver as well as critical thinker too.
I love that, because it is so easy to get overwhelmed, especially if then you know what hits the fan, or I'm thinking of students in nursing school, like advice for them, and I think that's a great thing to remember, is that when it seems so overwhelming, just one foot in front of the other, baby steps, and breaking it down into small, sort of reasonable tasks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And set your priorities. That's the whole thing too with nursing is what's your priorities. And if you can look at sort of a shift. I mean, they teach you basically that in nursing school. You know, set your priorities. What's the urgent care? What's the most important? You know, if somebody doesn't get their medication right at 8 o'clock, you know, it's okay. You know, you got this little time span. So you prioritize too. So
I like that. So, one last question for you here. Is there a mantra that you live by?
A
or sort of whether it's a quote or something that you sort of, it kind of, defines how you live day to day, like you were saying, like your values and your priorities, you stay grounded. If there were one saying or mantra or belief that sort of guides you, do you have one of those, or is there something that comes to mind that you want to share?
That's interesting because I have two sisters and we've always did one mantra, like something to live by every year, and we haven't done that lately, I have to say. So we'll have to get back to that. I think my thought is, as a nurse, first of all, as a nurse and as a profession, anytime you go into a situation, what's the worst scenario? I think that's why I look at it. What's the worst that could happen? Well, somebody's going to die or something like that. And anything above that, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You can work through it. You can understand it. You can deal with it. I used to, when I was in long-term care with the elderly, that was the biggest thing. And I would kiddily say, I only have 8 hours, and the last thing you're going to do is die on my shift.
Yeah.
Basically.
You're not on my shift.
That's not in the cards today. So
yeah.
But as a mantra is definitely such a priority. I mean, that's what I do, is set priorities, and what's the worst thing that needs to be done.
I love that. What's the worst thing that could happen? Because that's really...
You burn a pizza?
It's like, it's kind of, to me, I always see the silver lining, and that's a really good...
Be more optimistic than pessimistic. I'm so optimistic.
Because that'll take you so much further. It's
Right.
kind of along the same lines of those people that have gratitude and practice that.
Right.
Have more happiness. Things go their way because it's their perspective.
Right.
It's their vantage point.
Yep.
I love that.
See the brighter side.
Can
of the
you
rainbow.
share one more thing? What are you doing now in terms of nursing? And is there anything that you're working on or that you're...
Yes. I met Lisbeth in Branson, and that was my first holistic nursing conference.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I got the little badge. Anyway, I'm on Great Northern Holistic Nursing Board in Duluth, Minnesota, and I've been there a year, and we're gearing up for our next year and our next sessions and speakers. I'm going to be working on being certified, just get my certification in holistic nursing. People, we talk about this holistic nursing piece, but Florence Nightingale has been doing it since the turn of time, right, for nursing. She used lavender for the soldiers that, were for pain and things. So, and somebody had asked me that question, how did you get into, what's your thought about holistic, and why did I get into it? And I think I was literally born into it. I grew up on a family farm, and we never knew what a cake mix box was, or everything was grown, or we grew the vegetables and we raised the animals and we gardened and we had the fruit trees, and so all nature and all good for us. There was never anything that really came out of the grocery store too much. So that's how I got into it. I believe my direction has been this way for a long time, but I was just searching out for another step. And so holistic nursing is definitely great. Meeting a lot of great people, and I'd like to use more of the oils and the healing touch, and who knows where it'll take me, but that's what I'm working on. As far as work itself, I'm just with a home care service up in Duluth, and I'm just going to continue on being like a nurse manager or clinical nurse, and just do more visiting, just doing the evaluation on a monthly basis. That's all they want me to be, and I'm glad about that. So it's more flexibility, so I don't have to do the 8-hour shift anymore. So
wow, that's incredible. And how long have you been a nurse now?
Since 2009.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
2007 was when I ended up getting. I went to 2005, and then I got my LPN, and then 2 years in 2007. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love what you said about like sort of your roots and growing up on a farm. It's like coming full circle.
Totally full circle.
And I love that. I mean, once I went to nutrition school, I learned about the importance of, like, living on the land, and they just came out with a research study that shows that kids who, digging in the dirt and living on the land, and their guts are much healthier than the city kid who, is eating out of boxes all the time.
Yep. Yep.
So, any questions or any parting comments that you want to share with our listeners?
Just glad that I met you, in Branson, and I'm looking forward to what's next.
Oh, there's no telling what we're going to come up with.
There's no telling.
All right. Well, thank you, Jill.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.